This was me right after I started my business.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us for today's webinar. Today's session is called Support for Business in Reengineering and Innovation. And in reality, many of the schemes we will be talking about today are actually relevant for all businesses. Apart from myself, we have with us also today Malta Enterprise, and we have Kane, who will be assisting us by explaining the technicalities of a number of schemes. And this webinar is also supported by VAT4U, that also have a very interesting service that they will be talking about during the course of this session later on, that will help you with some liquidity issues and also tap into some untapped finances. We will be explaining more later on. We are also live on Facebook as usual for the beginning of this session, just for the introductions, and then we will close the live so that we can continue in a more intimate discussion. In fact, we will be taking questions, and I urge you to post your questions on the chat, not on the Q&A. When you go on the chat, something that you can do is choose all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see the questions, and like that we can coordinate together a bit better. Apart from being live on Facebook, Facebook is a tool that we use very frequently to keep in touch with our members, and our members also get in touch with us by talking to us on Facebook Messenger. We also have a LinkedIn page if you want to follow what we are doing, and we also have a WhatsApp alert system that you all can register for, just so that you know the most important alerts that are related to your business that we would send you. We do not use this very, very frequently in order not to inundate you with WhatsApp messages, but we just tell you that an important email is lying in your inbox. The WhatsApp alert system can be registered on the number 9999, so that is 495199. We will put it on the chat in the next couple of minutes. You just save that number on the name SME Chamber and send the word subscribe, and from there on you will be receiving these alerts every now and again. So moving on to the structure of today's session, first off, we will be starting off with Kane from Malta Enterprise, who will be explaining to us a couple of the new schemes that were announced earlier this month, which are related to COVID and to the special schemes that are there to help businesses in this very particular time we are in. And then we will be moving on to other schemes of Malta Enterprise that are also important for the moment, because I know from the many queries that we are receiving from businesses, the level of interest there are in certain projects and in certain initiatives, and we have tried to match schemes in relation to this interest that we are seeing. After this, we will both myself, but before me, VAT4U will be explaining this service that they have that will help you tap into any opportunities that you might have related to VAT that you have paid that you might be able to claim back. So with us, we have Kane Grech, who is Policy Manager at Malta Enterprise, and Kane will be giving us a bit of information, as I mentioned, on the newest schemes that were announced this month, specifically two schemes, the re-engineering scheme and also the microinvest conversion into a grant. As we know, and as you probably have checked, not all the schemes have all the details available as yet, but we are unwrapping them slowly, and Kane will kindly drive us through the first schemes that are available. Thank you, Kane. I leave it in your hands.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Abigail, for inviting Malta Enterprise to once again provide information on some of our measures. As Abigail has briefly mentioned, we can discuss briefly two of the COVID-related support schemes, which is the business re-engineering consultancy measure, and the other one is a change that we are carrying out in the MicroInvest 2020 scheme. Allow me to start with the second scheme, which is the MicroInvest 2020, as it is in a more advanced stage to be launched. It's a mechanism within an existing scheme, which in principle it was always a tax credit scheme, whereby for 2019 costs, so for expenses incurred last year, so for applications to be submitted in 2020, there is going to be a mechanism where applicants are requested that in a specific time window, which is going to commence very soon, is going to be communicated with our applicants. Applicants can request that part of the tax credit is converted into a cash grant with a maximum of €2,500. So we have two categories of applicants: those who have already submitted an application under MicroInvest. Most of these, especially self-employed, have been issued with a tax credit certificate already. And those applicants who are yet to submit an application, given that the MicroInvest allows for two specific deadlines. We call them the normal deadline for certificates to be issued at that point in time to be used for that particular year of assessment. And the late submission, we call them late submission, which is usually later on. The deadline is in December. So for the first category of applicants, those who have already been issued a certificate, a tax credit certificate, we shall be sending an email to these beneficiaries where the time window will be provided for a request to be submitted for part of that credit to be issued as a cash grant. You will have a cash grant, you will be provided with a cash grant of a maximum of 2,500, and we shall be reviewing and resending an updated tax credit certificate, which would be with the balance remaining of the approved assistance. That is category number one. Companies, limited liability companies, and currently we haven't issued much tax credit certificates because we knew about this change due to the COVID support measures. The amount shall be adjusted at the time of the tax credit certificate issued. So a request will also be sent to an email will be sent to applicants, even those who haven't been issued with a tax credit certificate to date. And the tax credit certificate will be adjusted from day one. You will be receiving a tax credit certificate with the amount of tax credit and also an approval for the cash grant itself. Those are category number one. Applications who are what we call them late applications, late submissions, are requested to submit the application ASAP. So we can start issuing these emails as well. You would still be receiving the tax credit certificate to be used in year of assessment 2020. So as a normal practice with late submissions, with late applications, but you can benefit from the cash grant immediately. And you will start using your tax credit certificate according to your financial plans that you had carried out. That in a nutshell is information which is available to date regarding the MicroInvest scheme. We are awaiting a confirmation from the State Aid Monitoring Board to launch and issue this support measure. However, we are at a very advanced stage in terms of the MicroInvest, the new MicroInvest.
Kane, we already have, in fact, some questions if you want to answer them before we move on. First of all, you have a fan. Someone is saying, big thank you to Kane Greg from Malta Enterprise for the funds they gave us.
Oh, I know Sharon, yes. Hi, hello Sharon.
And someone is asking, we have submitted the MicroInvest application, however, we haven't received the certificate yet. How long would it usually take? The normal MicroInvest application, of course, because the other one hasn't been made available yet.
Usually it depends. I mean, it's always the same reply that we provide, given the sheer volume of applications that we receive under the microinvest scheme. However, with regards to self-employed persons, we're at a very advanced stage. A lot of the tax credit certificates have already been issued. Companies, no. Limited liability companies, given that we were aware of this change in the microinvest scheme, we have stopped the issuing of tax credit certificates for now until we have an approval, a confirmation of the approved change in the microinvest scheme. So we issue from day one the tax credit accordingly, plus the approved cash grant. It depends. Usually it's weeks until we have a complete processing, unless there are certain clarifications that are carried out with the applicant.
And if they want to check the status of their application, of if there is anything wrong or maybe anything related to that, what is the best way to go about it?
We have two, so to speak, contact points with regards to the status of microinvest. We never, as clients, we never contact the processing unit per se, because we have an RM, a relations management function at Malta Enterprise, which is my unit, which is the Business Development Malta unit. So queries can be sent to us directly, even to myself, and we check the status of the applications with the processing unit and we communicate accordingly. Plus, there is also Business First. Ideally, queries are carried out with 144 through 144 or the general Business First email. And as well, same thing as with Business Development Malta, they will check with the processing unit and get back to you accordingly.
Okay. So someone is asking, can we apply for the now December deadline? Is it currently open?
Yes, the December deadline is just the deadline of the scheme. It doesn't mean that you can't apply within this period. You would still be issued with a late certificate, so to speak, as a late application. But yes, you can submit an application now. There's no need to wait for December. ANSI, we are encouraging late applicants to submit an application so we can issue this change for the microinvest immediately.
Yes, very good. And I think it's important that we also remind anyone listening that a microinvest is practically open to almost all companies, with since most of the Maltese companies are SMEs. The absolute majority can apply, and you can try and include costs related to any kind of investments that you have made, including any IT equipment, any additions in human resources you might have made last year, anything related to refurbishment. Maybe there are very small exclusions and most costs can be included. And now we know that there will be this possibility of converting part of this tax credit into the grant, which makes it even more attractive. Someone is asking, will a company tax credit issued in 2019 for 2018, which was not fully utilized, also qualify for a cash grant?
No, it's only on 2019 costs, so 2020 applications.
Okay.
This is quite clear.
Yes.
To date, we haven't received any communication that will be extended also for previous years.
Mm-hmm. And if we are not making profit this year, can we still get the 2,500 cash grant?
Yes.
That's the scoping. Okay, very good. Okay, so now I think, Kane, we can move on the scheme that many have asked us about. It's very interesting. At the moment, a lot of businesses are asking about maybe going into new sectors. They are seeing that their particular sector that they operate in will be having a hard time because it being tourism dependent or any other reason. And they are looking maybe into also diversifying so that they are not just dependent on one sector and how they are going to reinvent their business. So maybe we can go into that scheme and then we will continue taking questions after.
Yes, so the business re-engineering consultancy scheme, first of all, it will be open to SMEs, so to small and medium-sized enterprises. Although the way it was communicated, it mentioned industry at large, the focus will be on small and medium-sized enterprises for this particular measure. It doesn't mean, as probably the participants know, it doesn't mean that large companies cannot avail themselves of assistance when it comes to consultancy expenses, because there are already measures available at Malta Enterprise, which we can use. However, the business re-engineering scheme is going to be a specific measure for a re-engineering process in your business operations, which could mean a lot of things in actual fact, whether it's diversifying your portfolio, diversifying your sector, changing operating methods, changing, trying to find different value chains. These kind of changes in terms of actual consultancy costs behind these changes, these can be availed, these can be subsidized through the business re-engineering scheme. It's going to be a maximum of €5,000. At this stage, we are still drafting the first guidelines. However, generally speaking, this is what it's going to provide. It's sort of an enhanced business advisory scheme, which is an offer by Malta Enterprise. Currently, we just offer €500 voucher for applicants under the business advisory scheme. But we have found a mechanism where for a re-engineering process, we issue a cash grant basically on a reimbursement process. It probably is going to be on a reimbursement process of €5,000, but for small and medium-sized enterprises. That is the information that we have to date on the business re-engineering scheme, but it's going to be one of the first schemes issued as part of the COVID regeneration package.
Yes, it's part of the support package, so that if you are looking into other areas or studying ways of reinventing or improving your business, you might need some professional advice that can support you in making your decisions and moving ahead. Even when going to the bank to acquire some financing, this is something that would greatly strengthen the position of the person seeking financing, the business seeking financing, and help them in getting the funds through. Going a bit back, came to the microinvest scheme, because we are still getting questions about that.
Yes.
Is the amount of 2,500 for companies operating in Malta and Gozo? Is there a difference?
We are looking at a mechanism similar to what we have in general to the microinvest scheme, where businesses registered in Gozo are given an added bonus of a cash grant. Same with the tax credit, when it's 65% for Gozo-based enterprises. Probably the way it's going to be issued is €2,000 in general, and for Gozo-based enterprises it's going to be 2,500.
Okay. And can businesses apply so that authorities can be asked to organize assistance, which can be personalized by a visit to the premises for specific guidance to those establishments that require this? There are some businesses that are finding it difficult to guarantee safety in their particular premises without very professional assistance.
I understand. We do have a measure beyond the microinvest scheme, which can be discussed with individual clients on a case-by-case basis. If your business requires a complete change in terms of logistics or how operations are carried out due to the impact by COVID, we can discuss ways and means beyond the microinvest scheme, which can help you.
And I think we have a final question about microinvest. With December applications, you mean that Malta Enterprise is still accepting 2009 applications?
2019.
2019.
Not 2019 applications, expenses incurred in 2019.
Yes, exactly. So someone is asking that whether the support related to the re-engineering is in relation to the preparation of a business plan.
Very good question, but not really. Not really. So it's not intended for startups. It's for someone who is looking at starting a business. But if you are changing the way you carry out your operations, it's part of a business plan at the end of the day, but it has to be a re-engineering process. Usually it's part of a business plan, yes. The way applications are going to be assessed is through what we call a technical evaluation committee, where a committee which would be basically part of our board and management will be composed of a small team of technical people, and we will process applications on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. How can a consultant apply to be part of the approved providers?
We are looking at Luke, we're looking at a mechanism where you don't need to apply to become a recognized consultant. That is why it's going to be also, there's going to be an evaluation process, not like the current business advisory scheme where, you know, where you have an applicant selecting a pre-approved advisor by Malta Enterprise and we issue a voucher. It's going to be like a normal application for assistance. Then through the vetting process, through the evaluation process, cases are determined on a case-by-case basis.
We will be talking about training a bit later on, but someone is asking, does it include training?
No, it doesn't include training. It is not specifically tied to training. The assistance, the grant will be provided against a consultancy, against consultancy costs. So usually it's marked as under the administration cost in terms of a P&L, for example. So it's against costs, a consultancy cost.
Okay. Yes, because Sharon related to this is asking, if we reinvented ourselves without professional advice, do we still get some of the regeneration fund?
No, there has to be a consultancy service carried out. It has to be a cost to the company.
Mm-hmm. And would this be additional to the scheme being supported by the EU-funded SME consultancy grant scheme, which provides 4,000 grant for the preparation of a business plan?
In actual fact, I think something like this could be approved under the existing SME consultancy scheme. Our scheme will be specifically targeting a re-engineering process.
Yes, which goes much more in detail and it takes a different form in terms of a report than a
usually yes, because the consultant would see what changes are required and also help in the implementation of that change. So a re-engineering process is quite different than a normal business plan. It's an essential part of a business plan at this stage. But the consultant usually is engaged also to action those changes.
Okay, so this we already answered. What makes the business re-engineering scheme different from that of the measure support division? Again, it's not a business plan, it's a re-engineering scheme.
Yes, I think I replied to
yes.
This question.
Okay, so, but if we need a business plan to start a new niche within our company, is this subsidized? Possibly through the other scheme that we are mentioning of the measure support division?
Yes, and as always, as with Malta Enterprise, if we receive an application for support which wouldn't directly fit under one measure, but it's a good project, nonetheless, we can always look at existing schemes which are also cash grant basis of how we can be of support. There is a general scheme, it's called Business Development and Continuity. It's not specifically used to this end, but if the project submitted is interesting and is relevant to the company, but it doesn't fit under the re-engineering consultancy scheme, we can always look at ways how we can assist.
Okay, bouncing back to Microinvest. If the business opened in 2020 and there were expenses both in 2019 and 2020, what can one do for the Microinvest application?
Well, very interesting question. The expense has to be carried out when you were a business entity. So if you carried out expenses in 2019 and you weren't registered as a business, then we can't consider those expenses. This has always been the case. But if you are a business, you are registered as a business, a self-employed, limited liability company, partnership, whatever, and you have carried out 2019 costs and 2020 costs, you apply in 2020 for 2019 expenses, and then next year you apply for 2020 expenses.
Yes, and the easiest way to decide this is that on the invoice and the receipt, whatever, you would have the VAT number of the company.
Yes, ideally, yes, unless the company is, so still everyone has a VAT number, nearly everyone has a VAT number today.
Yes. The conversion to a cash grant. Is this to have strings attached? I ask in view of applicants who are currently still in the process of establishing themselves on the market and still making tax losses. Can you please amplify?
I don't have further details with regards to this particular question. I can always take note and we'll get back to you.
Okay, another interesting question is whether the re-engineering scheme will apply to cover costs related to human resource management.
It will definitely be part of human resource management changes as well.
Okay, without a pre-approved process, how will the client know if the expense will eventually be reimbursed, if I understood this correctly?
There is no pre-approval process. As with all other cash grant requests, there's an evaluation process. So if the project would fit in the specific guidelines that are yet to be issued, it will be approved.
Yes, more based on quality, probably, Kane, on the quality of the application and the improvement that they are going to make.
Yes, and at the same time, we have to understand the situation that we're in. So the scheme is going to be launched to be used at the end of the day. So if it is a re-engineering process, most probably you will be getting the assistance at the end of the day.
Yes. At the moment, it will look a bit abstract since not all the information is available, but one can start thinking and preparing in that direction. And would this scheme be available for undertakings in difficulty? I am not sure which one we are referring to, but
it's a very good question. Very good question indeed. Currently, we're in discussions with the European Commission, as we are awaiting for changes in the definition of undertakings in difficulty. As is, it's currently not available for undertakings in difficulty, but we are hoping for positive changes in that end. To that end.
Okay, and they are asking a bit about the breakdown of how the 5K will be calculated. Is it a percentage of the total cost, of the total consultancy cost, like 50%, capped at 5,000?
We're looking at 50%. Currently, we're looking at 50%. Already that hasn't been defined yet. That is what we're looking at.
Okay, so I think we have gone through all the questions. More might be coming in. And I think, Kane, we can move to the training scheme, which name escapes me at the moment, which I think is the most underappreciated scheme that Malta Enterprise has. I think it is a very valuable scheme, especially at the moment, and I know of a number of businesses that are using it to help them engage people at the moment and train them. Something that is worth pointing out that the wage supplement is not available to cover employee wages where someone has left out of their own free will from the business and you need to replace them. So in that case, there are other schemes, and coincidentally, we have also a webinar next week with Jobs Plus covering a number of other schemes related to training and employment that businesses in this situation should look into when employing or thinking to employ someone. In your hands, Kane.
So the what we call the training scheme it's called the skills development scheme. In principle, what it is targeting is the upskilling of the existing workforce. It's a good scheme. Assistance is capped at 70% of expenses for small enterprises, 60% for medium-sized enterprises, and 50% for large enterprises. Whilst the scheme was in principle provided as a tax credit, but management, if through an evaluation process and if requested by the client, we could have considered part of it to be provided as a cash grant. At this point in time, approvals are mostly provided in terms of a cash assistance. The scheme is quite versatile. We can look at a number of upskilling programs, both if carried out through internal resources, and also if we're looking at an external consultant to carry out the training required. Before it was even now, it was still open if the company, if the applicant is going to be sending his employees for training abroad. However, that wasn't working at this point in time. The scheme covers a number of expenses that are incurred in the retraining program. So remember, it's always about upskilling the workforce. The consultancy cost to develop the training program, it is an eligible expense. So if you are engaging a consultant to develop a training program, that is covered under the scheme. The wage cost for the trainees, so who is receiving the training during the training program, the contact hours for the training, that is subsidized. Remember, always at the intensity rates mentioned before, 70% for small, 60% for medium, and 50% for large enterprises. The wage cost of the trainers, so if we're looking at internal training and one of the employees are carrying out the training themselves, in terms they are the trainers, that is also covered. So that contact hour is covered. And also if you are engaging an external training provider, that is also covered. It's always at the intensity rates mentioned before. If you're still going to send employees abroad for training, we also subsidize the traveling cost. In general, that is the scheme. We can also subsidize the, if you're going to rent a conference room, for example, or a particular premises, which is not inside the business premises itself, we can also subsidize the rent costs for the duration of the training program. It's a scheme which has been used now since the commencement of COVID, because the way it works, it allows companies who might have reduce the number of working hours and increase the hours used up as training, given that we can subsidize the cost of training through the skills development scheme.
That's a very good combination. Yes, and obviously, since COVID, some businesses are not as busy as they were before, and now they have more time on their hands, and they can invest more in their employees by having them trained and obviously improving their positions and the work that they do within the company, and giving something to the employees that they can value for them personally. Mm-hmm. Someone is asking, can you elaborate further on how to use business re-engineering scheme for human resource management? Can you maybe, from your experience, can give some examples of how you see this happening?
All right. Now, although there is no specific guideline on human resource management, now I understand, just to clarify on the question, is it human resource management as a service or human resource management internal? So if a company is carrying out a change in terms of human resource management, or if a service provider providing human resource management, just to clarify.
Yes, I think I would see it in terms of the scheme, someone who is providing consultancy service to another company on their human resource management and how to improve it.
All right. Now, anything related to a re-engineering process which is one of the outcomes of the COVID impact, we can consider under the business re-engineering consultancy scheme, if it means that much of the consultant's cost relates to human resource management, whether it's upskilling, whether it's changing particular, whether it's going to be focusing on particular skill sets, any changes required in the workforce, if that is an outcome of the consultancy service provided in terms of the re-engineering process, that for me could be an eligible cost, and I see it fitting under the business re-engineering scheme. Although guidelines haven't been issued yet, it is something that we are looking at the end of the day as Molt Enterprise.
Okay, and moving back to Microinvest, how will the process be initiated? Someone is asking, so to get a cash grant for Microinvest, we have to wait for an email from Molt Enterprise. Will you be initiating the process from Molt Enterprise if they have a tax credit, or will they?
Yes, it's going to be initiated by Molt Enterprise.
Okay. If the business was a sole trader for the last 7 years and the owner died at the end of 2019, the business was passed on to the wife, who, maybe you need to draw this down, okay? The business was passed on to the wife, who has now registered the business as a limited company. Can she still claim expenses of 2019 under Microinvest?
I'll have to get back to you. I think we do have case studies where we have accepted. If we see that there is a continuation of the business, we'd approve that. But I'll confirm for the specific case through offline, through another email, basically, if that's okay with you, Claire.
Okay, and it sounds like it was kept within the family, so...
Yes. If, for example, the business has a family business certificate, it will definitely be approved. We had case studies, but I have to go into detail on this case merit itself.
Mm-hmm. It is a continuation of this business.
All right. We'll take this offline, Claire.
Okay. Can individuals apply for a course and get it funded? Or does it have to be a company training its employees to get funds for the costs?
It has to be a company training program, not for individual employees. Individual employees, as students, so to speak, remember that there are specific schemes, such as the Get Qualified scheme. And if I understand correctly, there is something also funded by the Multi Development Bank in terms of courses sponsorships.
Mm-hmm. And I think Molt Enterprise has Get Qualified as well.
Yes, Get Qualified. Remember, Get Qualified provides 70% of the expenses in terms of a tax rebate. Not tax credit, it's a tax rebate. So if you would have paid that amount of tax during your lifetime, you can claim back that same amount immediately, not as a tax credit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does the training need to be accredited by NCFHE?
In terms of private training providers, yes, they have to hold an NCFHE license.
Okay. For internal training, no, we don't need to accredit.
No.
Okay. When will the business process re-engineering grant be launched, and for how long will it be available?
Hopefully very soon. We're expecting it to be launched in the coming few days. I don't have the exact time frame for the duration of the scheme. So again, we'd have to communicate that detail later on.
Okay. So, okay, we have reached the end of the questions. And maybe, Kane, please, if you can, guide us through some schemes that Molt Enterprise have available related to startups and new business, so to say. So not a continuation or whatever we were talking about before, but something new that is starting now.
All right. Just one thing, if you allow me, Abigail, regarding the skills development scheme, because I believe it's a very important point. The maximum cash grant allowed for a particular project under the skills development is of €2 million, which is quite heavy. So we're looking both at small training programs, small scale training program, and also larger scale training programs. So that is something to consider.
Yes,
Now,
very significant. And actually, we got another 2 questions that we might take before moving on. Will there be an extension of the microinvest scheme next year? Will it be?
we're waiting for a confirmation for that, Stephen.
And with regards to Get Qualified, when are the tax credits sent, please?
I'd have to get you in touch with the person the unit managing the Get Qualified scheme.
Yes, from the information that I have from our experience, usually after the course is complete, but I think it's best that we pass on the message and then get in touch.
Yes, you'd have to successfully complete the course.
Yes, but they do get it very frequently because I get that kind of feedback quite a lot. They tell me we are receiving at the moment the Get Qualified tax credits.
Yes, it is a lifeline, in actual fact. It's a good incentive to continue your academic studies.
Okay.
So startup schemes. So we have 3 startup schemes at Malt Enterprise. I'll just mention them, then go into detail one by one. One is called BStart. It's intended for businesses who are looking at starting a business and do not require a lot of capital injection, so they're not capital intensive. And I'll explain why. We have the Startup Advance, which is a bit sort of the bigger sister of the BStart scheme. You'd have to have at least 2 full-time employees at application stage. So it's intended for startups who are either expanding their operations or require additional support, and also explain why when I come to that particular scheme. And we have the Startup Finance scheme. Now, the Startup Finance scheme, it's a very, very interesting scheme. It's intended for startups who are either R&D intensive, or they are very capital intensive, or require a lot of financial assistance to carry out a particular project. So let's start with the BStart scheme, which is the primary scheme. It's also a flagship scheme at Malt Enterprise because it was the first startup scheme launched. I believe it was available since 2015, the BStart scheme. So the BStart scheme is available for nearly all economic sectors, even the retail sector. In terms of the retail sector, however, applicants have to show that they have a technical solution to carry out their business operations. But really and truly, the BStart scheme is applicable to nearly all economic sectors. What we look for are projects which are either new or novel in the market, or provide a better solution when compared to similar products or services in the market. It is a very good scheme. The way it works, it provides a cash injection element upon approval if the project is approved, and then support is continued for the first year of the business lifetime, or within a year after the approval, after the letter of intent, the project has been approved. It's intended at early stage startup. So startups who have elapsed their second year wouldn't be eligible for BStart. And definition of startup, I think I've mentioned this even in earlier webinars. The definition of startup is not just that you can't elapse your 5th year in operation in your current legal entity scope, but if you have been engaged in the same sector under previous legal entities, such as, for example, self-employment or other companies, and you are a shareholder of the applicant company, you are not considered as a startup. and there are other schemes which are for non-startups. So the B-Start scheme, the maximum assistance is of 25,000. The element of cash injection at approval stage is of a maximum of 10,000 euro, which is determined by a number of factors. First of all, we see how many people are engaged at the beginning, at application stage. So if you are more than one partner, there is a chance that you will be getting more assistance in terms of a cash injection. Plus, we also see what expenses have to be incurred at the initial stages of the business, such as, for example, if the business is capital intensive, you require lots of equipment, lots of licenses, for example. There is a good chance that we provide we near the maximum, which is of 10,000 euro. If we see that there are no expenses that need to be incurred, no material costs, no consultancy costs, no equipment, so no investment in terms of capital investments, such plants and machinery, there is a chance where you are given a cash injection, but it's not of the maximum of 10,000 euro. It would be lower. Usually it's between 5,000 and 10,000 euro. There were times where we have provided even less, such as 3,000 or 2,500 euros. It depends on the case. We have to go on a case-by-case basis after we would have discussed the measure with the applicant. Then, given that the maximum assistance under the scheme is of 25,000, so hypothetically speaking, let's say that you were approved and granted 10,000 euro, there's a balance of 15,000 euro. The additional support will be provided per quarter up to the first year. You submit a quarterly report. We see how many people are engaged on a full-time basis per quarter, and we provide 1,500 per full-time employee per quarter. Maximum scheme globally is of 25,000 euro. If it is a women-led enterprise, or if one of the partners, at least 50% shareholding, is of a female entrepreneur, the amount is of 2,000 euro per full-time employee, not 1,500 euro. This is to incentivize women entrepreneurship. Malta Enterprise can also grant additionally 1,000 euro per quarter if the company will not be engaging full-timers during the first year. There is a condition in the guidelines themselves that Malta Enterprise at approval stage can grant an additional 1,000 euro per quarter. In a nutshell, that is the B-Start scheme. I don't know whether, Abigail, we want to take any questions for the B-Start scheme now.
We have a couple, yes. So we'll have to take a bit of a step back into the upskilling program. Thus, training emanating from government guidelines such as back to work in the new normal, or legislation such as GDPR awareness qualify for the training scheme?
If the company is legally bound to provide a specific training, no, we can't consider that training under the skills development scheme. So, for example, I don't know, let's say a construction company which is eligible for the skills development is legally bound to provide health and safety training to their employees. That cannot be considered under the skills development. But if it is an upskilling program and you are not legally bound to provide that training, that yes, that is eligible.
Okay, and moving on to B-Start, are you currently accepting B-Start applications, as they were not accepting applications when the COVID-19 pandemic started?
That is incorrect, Luke. In fact, the volume of B-Start applications has actually increased during the COVID pandemic, and it is as expected, as what happened in other countries when there is an increase in unemployment, self-employment and new startup businesses tend to increase. And in fact, we have received a lot more B-Start applications than we did in January and February. So yes, we are accepting B-Start applications. We haven't stopped doing that.
Okay, and a more generic question, are any of these schemes applicable for small catering establishments, for example, the opening of a new cafe?
All right. Apart from the COVID measures, such as the wage supplement scheme, which now has closed, it was eligible for such business activities. The skills development would apply if that fits your needs. But also the microinvest scheme. The microinvest scheme, which in principle usually it's a tax credit scheme, but now we have allowed that part of it to be converted as a cash grant, would apply for a cafe or a small catering establishment.
Yes. Okay, so those are all the questions that we have.
All right, Startup Advance. So the Startup Advance, I call it the bigger sister of BStart because in actual fact it is like the bigger sister of BStart, because the way it works is that we provide support per quarter under the scheme. Maximum assistance is of €100,000, and it is provided for the duration of the business in its startup phase. So until the startup concludes its 5th year in operation, it can be supported subject to an approval mechanism, support through the Startup Advance scheme. Same as with BStart, we look at innovative solutions. So businesses who are proposing something novel, something innovative, or a better product or service than is already existent in the market. And whilst BStart, there is a specific clause that the product or services can be exportable, can be traded abroad. Under the Startup Advance scheme, that is a prerequisite. The potential for exporting the product, it has more weight under the Startup Advance scheme. So we are looking at startups which can internationalize their products and services in terms of operations. Assistance is still granted under the same mechanism as of BStart. So you will get support based on the number of full-timers you have per quarter. There is no element of cash injection, however, under the Startup Advance scheme. So ideally, applications under this particular scheme has enough capital, has enough cash, so to speak, to kickstart the operations, because you will not be provided with a cash injection element upon approval. Support is granted, same with BStart, on a quarterly basis, maximum of €100,000 per scheme. That is with regards to the Startup Advance scheme. I didn't provide additional details because in principle, the way it works, it's the same as the BStart scheme.
Okay, so far it doesn't appear that we have any questions about it. Maybe they will come in later on. But you also have another scheme related to startups, Kane, don't you?
Yes. Yes, we have another scheme. It's called the Startup Finance Scheme, and I have to open up the guidelines for this particular scheme because it's quite detailed. The Startup Finance Scheme, first of all, the amount of assistance that can be approved is of a maximum of €800,000. So we're looking at a heavy scheme in itself. It is a repayable grant. It is not a cash grant. It's not on a reimbursement process, neither, but it is a repayable grant. Basically, the way it works is any advance that Malt Enterprise provides has to be repaid back upon profit making. When the company becomes profitable, it starts paying back a 20% plus interest, which I can look at the guidelines, back to Malt Enterprise. So it is sort of a business loan, but with preferential terms. So there is a moratorium. The moratorium is until you start making a profit, because the loan, so to speak, has to be repaid back at 20% on profits. Now, the Startup Finance Scheme, we look for particular projects. We look for projects which have a potential for growth. and which have a number of the multiplier effect is quite interesting to the economy. So there has to be a return, an economic return to any financing that we provide as Malt Enterprise. We do not take equity in the company, which is an important element of this particular scheme. So Malt Enterprise doesn't come in as a shareholder or a silent partner with you if it is approved. However, projects have to have an economic return. It doesn't mean that other schemes, there isn't this prerequisite, because at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money. So we need to make good investments as Malt Enterprise. The assistance can be provided under a number of mechanisms, so we can cover a number of costs. First of all, we can provide the assistance against wage cost. So the way it works is that every quarter we see what expenses in terms of wage cost is going to be incurred, and we provide an advance. If the startup company hasn't elapsed its third year, still within its third year of operation, we advance 75% of the relevant wage cost for that particular quarter. If the company is in its fourth year, we advance 50% of wage cost, not 75%. So as you understand, given also that we never subsidize 100% of expenses at Malt Enterprise, needless to say, you would need to have the difference, enough cash to sustain your operations. That is one thing. We subsidize the payroll cost. We can also provide assistance calculated at 75% for the procurement of tangible and intangible assets. In terms of tangible assets, it is always plant and machinery, so machinery and equipment. First time used in Malta or new, same as with other schemes. But if we're looking at intangible assets, these are predefined. First of all, these assets have to be amortizable. So we're not looking at consultancy services, for example, but we're looking at technical know-how, licenses, patents, or other intellectual property, which is basically capitalized, which is put in the balance sheet. We can also subsidize 75% of that in terms of an advance. Intangible assets, however, it's at 50%. So 75% of plant and machinery, so tangible assets, 50% on intangible assets. And there are also other ways and means how we can provide the assistance. So if, for example, Malt Enterprise approves a pot of money, a cash grant, a repayable cash grant under this measure, the way we can provide the assistance is that we can also partly match a successful equity financing round. So if you have an additional third-party investor investing in the company and through private equity, Malt Enterprise can provide 50% of that amount under this particular scheme. So instead of waiting to engage staff, for example, part of the amount approved can be advanced as 50% of private equity. Also, under the same measure, another mechanism, another way how we can provide this assistance is if there was a successful crowdfunding campaign, because some projects require a crowdfunding campaign as a financing mechanism, especially if the product is something which is a consumable. For example, it is sold B2C usually. If you start a crowdfunding campaign, if that is successful, Malt Enterprise can also provide 50% of that crowdfunding money through the startup finance scheme. The annual premium is of 2% for any repayable grant advance. Again, we are looking at particular projects. I have to admit that it's not for every startup enterprise, but we are looking at innovative startups at the end of the day. It's a matter how to also attract and foster talent locally, and also projects which can internationalize their operations, so they cannot be solely based for the local market, and products and services where there is no saturation in the market itself. Sector-wise, a lot of economic sectors are also eligible. There has to be a return to a return basically, not on our investment per se as multi-enterprise, but a return to the economy at large.
Thank you, Kane. You are very, very resourceful in explaining the different schemes that multi-enterprise has. And we have gone through a number of schemes that might interest different kind of companies for different things during different stages of their life of the company. So if you have more questions, you can also pass them on to us by email, and we will be referring them to Kane. And even if you would like to go into more detail about certain projects that you have in mind or more specifics, Kane is always very helpful in assisting us. Thank you, Kane. I'm not saying that we have any more questions. I think everyone is very busy thinking about what you said and starting to put their mind to work to it.
Thank you all. Any questions, as always, please relay them to me, Abigail.
Thank you very much, Kane. And now we can move to the last two interventions, which cover two services that will help you in recouping some funds that you might not be aware that you can get back. And currently, with how things are and the difficulties with liquidity many businesses have, I think we do not afford to have funds lying there that we can recoup and not make use of. So I introduce VAT4U. VAT4U is supporting this webinar, especially through a sponsorship, and we thank them very much for their support, which helps us a lot as an organization. And Stephen, hello. We have Stephen Abella with us, who is the managing partner at VAT4U, and I leave it in your good hands to explain what you do and the services that you provide for business. I think you need to, we can't hear you, to unmute.
Yeah, you're right. Well, thanks for the introduction and well done for this very informative webinar. So, well, VAT4U is all about, as you have correctly stated, we're all about assisting companies in claiming back their VAT, which they have already incurred and actually already paid for. So most of the companies we're finding out are not aware of the VAT which they have paid outside of Malta. So all of us were used to the reverse charge mechanism where we're not paying the supplier outside of Malta. However, like when the product, where the service is enjoyed outside of our shores, we're actually obliged to pay the VAT over there. So for example, a very typical example is hotel costs, or it can be like training costs. We have also mentioned training before. However, when we're actually going for training or doing some kind of business meetings abroad, we're actually paying the VAT over there. So it can be like any country outside of Malta, where obviously the VAT mechanism is being triggered. So most of the companies, usually they just sort of forget about it. They just account for it within their cost, and they do not really like think about it. However, it's a pot of money which can actually be very useful, especially during these particular times, which are quite difficult for all of us. So what we are encouraging the companies is to actually look into their expenses and claim back the VAT which they have incurred. And the best news about it, especially considering that right now traveling is very, very limited, is that we are still able to claim the 2019 expenses. The deadline is in September, so we still have got like 3 months to go. So we're still in time, we're still eligible to claim those expenses. We need to point out that this capability of claiming back the VAT is forced within the 8th directive, what is known as the 8th VAT directive of the EU. It applies to all EU countries, and in terms of the 13th directive, it applies to some non-EU countries. However, like for the countries which are outside the EU, it has to be applied on a case-by-case basis. However, for the EU countries, all countries fall within this regime. One other important thing that we are finding that there's quite lack of knowledge about it is that each country within the EU has different VAT regulation. So it has a different VAT rate, but it can also have different VAT limitations. So in that case, we are eligible to claim the VAT depending on the country regulations. So for example, I can freely claim hotel costs in the UK, for example. However, I may not be able to claim those costs in Greece. So like each country has got different limits. Some of them are more lenient and we can claim all the VAT expenses. Some of them have some cappings, for example, like 40% capping of the VAT. Otherwise won't allow us. So like our role is actually to assist the companies in understanding these limitations, facilitating the process, because like where the non-technological means and software are not used, if the process is done manually, it may be quite laborious. So our role is that of assisting these companies in claiming back this VAT. One important note which I would like to point out is that hotel costs, traveling expenses are the most obvious ones. However, we're finding out that so many companies have different costs depending upon the sector which they're working in. So like we need to analyze each and every company. They need to go and back to 2019 expenses, properly analyze their costs, and actually analyze what actually they can claim back. Very important, this VAT has already been paid for. So it's crucial that we get back this VAT, which has already been forfeited.
We have a question, Stephen. Hi, yeah. I have been to exhibition fairs outside Malta, namely Ireland and the UK. Can I claim the VAT back for hotel accommodation and more costs?
Yeah, sure. Not just hotel. It can be actually the fee to go to the exhibition. It can be exhibition costs. It can be transport, restaurants. So anything which falls within the normal business operations, we can claim those expenses. Obviously, we need to follow the regulations of each and every country wherever we have expensed these, we have incurred these costs.
And what would be your words of advice if I was a company and I am not sure whether I have any such costs to claim back? Where should I start from? And if maybe I do have these costs in mind, how can you help me as VAT for you?
Well, so first of all, to the recommendation to the companies out there, first of all, is not to understate the VAT which you can claim. We're finding so many companies who initially are very reluctant, or maybe they do not really think that they have any VAT at all to incur, and actually the amounts are quite significant. So that's the first rule, is never understate your potential. Second thing is obviously to keep an eye out for the invoices. So in most cases, we're finding that companies are ignoring the invoices and the foreign invoices. Just because we're not claiming VAT directly in that country doesn't mean that we can close an eye upon the invoices. So we still need to make sure that the invoice is compliant. We need to make sure that the VAT is inputted. So that is very important. So the official documentation is still required, and we need, as a company, we need to make sure that we can actually maintain that. From our side, what we provide, the service which we provide, we practically provide an A to Z service, where through our platform, we assist the companies in getting their invoices, getting the documentation, reviewing the documentation together with our OCR and our artificial intelligence embedded within the platform, and ultimately claim back the VAT, and obviously chase and liaise together with the tax authorities, because like usually every claim would ultimately lead to a number of queries, a number of questions from the relevant authorities, and ultimately get back the money which we are entitled to in terms of VAT claim.
And Stephen, if you had to give those listening to us a bit of an idea of the amounts that you see companies being able to claim, because maybe they would say, why would I go through all this hassle for 200 euros or something like that? I think it can reach much, much higher.
So it can reach much, much higher, but not just that. Like the first year, it can be quite on the low side. In the second year, we have seen companies who have like increased their VAT return like by tenfold or even like even more than that, just because they're more on the lookout. So that is crucial. Other than that, so or sort of we need also to look into the way it means how we're running our operation. So the way we're running our operations will ultimately lead to certain kind of expenses who may be triggered from one kind of operator or the other. Like sometimes the choice of vendor would also make quite a significant difference to our costs. So we also need to be like more aware of the VAT treatment in relation to that kind of expense.
As you are saying, it's a bit of a learning curve. So first of all, you need to be made aware, as you are doing now. And many are saying that they did not know about this before. And in fact, I think I have seen some figures through one of your communications that globally billions of...
Actually, that's, in Europe, there is around 10 million of VAT, which is still left unclaimed. So that's well, a huge sum of money, which we can tap into that. Let's bear in mind that as Malta being an island and being like such a small market, we're bound to like do loads of traveling and loads of trade to get with other countries. So like we're almost inclined to go abroad, and that means like we can claim back that VAT.
Yes, and maybe some technicalities. Would they need to have their VAT numbers on the invoices to show that it is a business trip?
Now that change. So first of all, the base regulation is that any business whose services are VATable and who can claim back the VAT here in Malta, then they are ultimately like entitled to claim back the VAT outside of Malta. So for example, if we have to take as an example the finance industry whose services are not VATable, then they cannot claim back the VAT here in Malta, therefore they cannot claim the VAT outside of Malta. So if we can claim the VAT here, we're entitled to do that. So that's the first thing. Secondly, it also varies upon the service which we're going for. So that changes a lot, and it also affects the countries where we are incurring our expense. So some countries would require a full VAT where we have got all the details for all the expenses. Some of them have all these requirements in place, but from a certain limit onwards. So we are like entitled to have just a receipt which acts as a proof of payment up to a certain level of expenses. Following that, we need a full compliant invoice. But this rule regulation varies from country to country, and actually it's our role and the role of our platform to guide the user through these different regulations and these different constraints and permissions which we have.
Yes, the most important point is that this money has already been paid, so there's only to get a return out of all this process.
And actually, that's what we want to emphasize on, that like any business. So first of all, being an AI platform and being like a technologically advanced company, so we can actually assist all the companies out there. So what the message which we really would like to pass over is that no one has anything to lose from actually using this kind of service, because it's the VAT has already been paid. Um, there is no cash outflow beforehand. So ultimately, our aim is to assist the companies in claiming back what has already been paid.
And maybe if you can repeat, because someone is asking the eligibility period that you mentioned.
So for the EU countries, we can apply for the previous year up to September. So for example, in the year 2020, you can claim back the 2019 expenses. For the ones falling within the EEA, with the exception, so for example, Switzerland, with the exception of 2019 expenses, because it's a COVID year and there were some exceptions in order to assist the companies, usually we can claim those expenses up till June. So June 2020, we can claim back all the expenses for the 2019 expenses. So exactly, so the previous year, so the full year for 2019 up to June, with the exception of June 2020, so this year. So this year, up to September, we can still claim the EEA expenses because it's a COVID year and we have been given an extension to the deadline.
And moving on forward, now that those hearing us are aware that they should be on the lookout for this and they will start maybe claiming back their VAT. Are there any deadlines? Do the same deadlines apply forward looking? Or they can do this at any point?
No, they can do this at any point. We must also point out that there are like two types of submissions. There are the quarter submissions and the yearly submissions. Now, every country has its own requirements, so they need to reach a certain amount of VAT to be claimed if they are going to submit the quarter submission. For those who have got lower VAT amounts, then they will have to opt for the yearly submission. But other than that, there are no deadlines, so they can start off claiming, obviously, of the previous year, and that's it.
Okay, and just for as a general information, logistics, we always pass on a mailer to our participants so that we give them some information following the webinars, and we will be passing on your contact details so that they can get in touch with you for more information and to guide them through the process.
Very good.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen. It's an eye-opener. I think with many businesses stand to gain from this. And in fact, on a similar note, and as a final sort of presentation, I am now moving to the Maternity Trust Fund. The Maternity Trust Fund, basically, the same situation applies. So businesses from a number of years back would have paid maternity to the employees, of course. When we are saying paid maternity, sometimes the employees go out on maternity leave and the employer would still pay the employee whilst the employee is not present at work and out on maternity leave. Basically, in July 2015, the companies, all businesses that employ someone started paying a bit more in their NI contribution to start putting funds into this maternity trust fund. That's what it is called. And the good news about this is that, as Stephen explained earlier, this can also be recouped backdated. So since July 2015, if you have anyone that went out on maternity leave and you have paid, of course, for this maternity leave as a business, and if you have anyone that also went out on adoption leave, and in this case, it is not just females because in adoption, you have both parents involved, and you paid for the adoption leave, you can get back a maximum of 14 weeks of the full amount paid to the employees, to your employees. This applies both if the employees were on part-time or on full-time, And the expenses involved are that you can claim back. It is the full basic wage, the pro rata statutory bonuses and allowances, and the portion of DNI paid by the employer. So as you can see, the full expense of the maternity or the adoption while your employees were out from work and you were still paying them, in order obviously to, because it is an important part of the employee's life to be with the family at that moment, but you obviously were still paying them. The government has created this fund, which has originally been financed by businesses, as I said, through the regular NI contributions that are paid. And as long as you have paid them and everything is documented normally through pay slips and the normal things that go on about the payee, you will be able to claim back all this period, the 14 weeks. When we made a very quick calculation, this amounted to anywhere between 1,000 and something to quite a number of thousands that you can claim back per employee, depending, of course, on the wage of the employee that you were paying out. I repeat that this can be claimed back since July 2015. For all employees that since July 2015 went out on maternity or adoption leave. In fact, we had one of our employees that was out on maternity during the period, and before actually July 2015, she was still out on maternity leave when this started, and we actually claimed back the maternity leave we paid from July 2015 onwards, which was left falling within the eligibility period. The only requirement that you have in order to do this is to submit a very short list of documents that you would already have, and you can submit this online through your EID. Alternatively, if you do not have any EID, this is a service, an additional service that we also offer. We help you in compiling the documents that you need and submitting this through our own EID system as a Chamber of SMEs, and make sure that you get your refund back because the application would be done correctly. And over the past couple of years, we have managed to get quite a bit of funds, a substantial bit of funds for our members. That is always very welcome, because this is money that you have paid, not just when you put the extra portion of DNI into the fund that you have to do by law, but also you paid it twice because you are also paying the maternity and the adoption leave for your employees. So I encourage you to go a bit back in memory lane. Think if you paid any maternity or adoption leave since July 2015, and get in touch with us for more information to be able to help you make your submissions. And I think these are, we closed off with two important points, that in the current situation, we know how tight on liquidity businesses are, and we just don't afford to have thousands of euros lying there and not being untapped and not being recouped. So with that, I think we can close this webinar. I thank you very much for being with us and for your active participation. It makes it so much interesting getting your questions and getting your feedback. I really appreciate it. And if you have any follow-up questions, do pass them on. As I said before, we will get back to you with a follow-up email with useful information related to the webinar, and we obviously will stay in touch. Next week, we have one related to Jobs Plus, a webinar related to Jobs Plus that will explore the employment schemes and the training schemes, which have been enhanced now in times of COVID. So it will be very interesting. If you want to join us, it will be held next Tuesday. Please register if you haven't done so yet. And like that, you will have completed the full set of knowledge related to training and employment schemes. Thank you very much, and I wish you a good rest of the day.